that, my name is April. Welcome to the State Library. I'm a librarian here. Thank you for coming to our October Author Talk. Thank you for everyone who came in person, and thank you for everyone who's viewing virtually. Some more housekeeping. Please note this is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. The recording is courtesy of the House Broadcast Services. And with that, today I'm excited to introduce and welcome back Susan Wilson. Susan spoke here last year on her book, Children First, The Trailblazing Life of Susan Dimock, MD. But today, Susan is here in her role as the official historian of the Omni Parker House. Susan's book, Heaven by Hotel Standards, celebrates the 170-year history of Boston's Omni Parker House Hotel. Since 1855, the hotel has been a landmark and center for culture, writers, artists, and politicians. The hotel is also renowned as the birthplace of Parker House rolls and the Boston cream pie. A little background on Susan. In addition to being a historian, writer, photographer, and journalist, her writing regularly appearing in the Boston Globe between 1978 and 1996. Wilson is also an alumni of the Museum School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and holds both undergraduate and graduate degrees in history from Tufts University. She was also on the faculty of the New England School of Photography and served as their director of Cross Current Seminar Series. At the end of the presentation, we invite you to ask any questions you may have for Susan. Just raise your hand and we'll give you a mic so that everyone can hear. And also, books will be available for purchase after the talk. So with that, I'll hand it over to Susan. She's got such a passion for local history and she brings history to life. So let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, April. I appreciate it. Okay, let's get started. I'm sorry I didn't bring any Boston cream pie. Next time, I promise. This is where I want to start, with Sam Clemens. Who? Mark Twain, thank you. Why am I talking about Sam Clemens? Because here's a picture of him, and the Parker House was already very, very famous when he started coming to Boston in 1877. And he was staying there in room 168 and was being interviewed by someone from the Boston Globe. And the person came in, the reporter came in, was ushered into the room and kind of waited there for a minute. And Twain had his back turned and he was in a swivel chair. And in one hand he had a newspaper, I hope the Globe, and in the other hand a big cigar. So the reporter waited and was kind of nervous, and then Twain twirls around and looks at him and says, "You can clearly see I'm in heaven, not theologically, of course, but by the hotel standard." Given that fabulous quote, we did decide to name the book about the Parker House, Heaven by Hotel Standards. What is pretty exciting is that we are celebrating the 170th anniversary of the Parker House. However, what's even more exciting is it's today. Okay, on October 8th in 1855, the Omni, well, not the Omni at the time, it was just the Parker House. The Parker House opened. So I'm thrilled to be giving this on the exact day that this happened. What's also pretty thrilling is that we've just recently gone through a major year-long renovation, like major renovation, which is being called the Rebirth of a Legend. And if you have any question about the legendary status, when I start telling you some of the stories, it'll become clearer. So do stop by to see how amazing things are looking right nowadays. The person who started this all was Harvey. Harvey is Harvey Drury Parker. He was born in 1805, and he was born in Maine. If he was born in Maine in 1805, does anyone know what state he was born in? Massachusetts, very good. Okay, because at that time, Massachusetts was still a part of Maine. Maine didn't become a separate state until 1820. He was born there, and he was born in a place called Temple, Maine, that was so small that a street there that's now called Maple Street at his time was called Cowturd Lane. Very rural. He was the oldest of 13 children, and he was very ambitious. And his family lived in 3 different towns in rural Maine and were farmers. And his ambition got the best of him. He said, "I've got to get out of here. I think I need to go to Boston." So he went to the coast. He took a packet down to Boston. and look for some odd jobs. He didn't know what he wanted to do, but he knew he needed to get out of farmland. Here's a map of Maine at the time, and showing 3 of the different places in Temple, Paris, Maine, and also Andover, Maine, the Parker family lived. Now, because he knew his horses and his cows and his farm animals really well, one of the jobs he was able to get was being a coachman. And one of those jobs involved a wealthy woman who lived in Watertown. And she loved to shop in downtown Boston. And downtown Boston at this time, we're talking about 1820s and 30s, was really this area, down where School Street meets Washington on State Street, and kind of like the downtown shopping district today. He would drive in, she would get out and start to go shopping, and he had to find a place to go with his horse and carriage. He went around the corner to what was called Court Square off Court Street today, and he found a little cafe called Hunt's Cafe. And he fell in love with Hunt's Cafe. First of all, he was allowed to park there, but second of all, this underground cafe fascinated him, and he went there all the time, and eventually he started waitering there, and eventually he saved his money and he bought it. So after 7 years in town, Harvey Parker, for $432, bought Hunt's Cafe and started his first restaurant. So very often people say, how is it that a Maine farm boy started a major hotel? There was a lot of time in between, and Parker's restaurant on Court Square was one of those steps. Now here's one of the early menus there, and he learned the tricks of the trade. He got a lot of local people to really care about what he was doing. He was very friendly. He was always there, always looking over people and saying, are you okay? What do you need? What do you like? And trying to do the best food possible. So he did attract a whole lot of local people. But that wasn't enough for him, okay? So if you look at this map, in the upper right, that's roughly where Parker's restaurant was in 1832. Harvey did this for 20 years, and everybody loved it. Meantime, Boston was growing. There weren't any wars. More and more people were traveling. More and more people had money. And there was a lot of wealth to go around. And this newfangled thing called hotels was developing. And there were a couple of other hotels in town. But Harvey said, you know what? I want to take my restaurant business and I want to build it into something that's just part of a bigger thing, part of a hotel. I want the best food, but I want the best, most luxurious, safest, most wonderful lodging. So he basically went around the corner onto School Street, and you see in the lower left where the Parker House was opened, and that's the same place where it is today. And so in 1855, with some supporters, with his partner, John Mills, he was able to open the Parker House and attract a clientele not only from Boston, but traveling around the U.S. and within a very short time from around the world by doing everything as best he possibly could. This is what the Parker House looked like at the time. It didn't go all the way down to Tremont Street. It was just on School. But that original entrance is very much where the School Street entrance to the Parker House is to this day. So this was from one of his early menus. And for the next decades, this is, I think this is from Life magazine in maybe the 1920s or 30s. Well, oh no, they didn't start. When did Life magazine start? Anyway, I think this is from the 30s. Anyway, it became famous and maintained its fame decade after decade, long after Harvey had died. Now, what was Harvey's secret? Number one, location, okay? He was told when he saw this space, he saw these decrepit old buildings sitting on School Street and thought, nobody's taking care of those. It would be easy to tear one of those down and build my hotel there. And some of his advisors said, I wouldn't do that anywhere near School in Tremont because on the corner of Tremont on Beacon is probably the nicest hotel in town. It was called the Tremont Hotel, and it was utterly gorgeous. It's not there today because it didn't make it into the 20th century. But Harvey said, I don't care if it's there because I'm watching the people going by, walking up School and Beacon Street, okay? For starters, there's a lot of smart people around here and always have been. For example, School Street, you may know, there's no school on School Street. However, the first public school in the United States which is today known as Boston Latin, was started on School Street. It was originally right behind where King's Chapel is today. That was the first incarnation. The second incarnation was across the street. So the left-hand side of the Parker House, basically where Parker's Bar is, was where their second location was, and that was also their third location. So he said, I know for starters, there's lots of smart people who have been walking up and down these streets for a long, long time. Boston's very literate. Up the street from the Parker House, at my favorite address, 10.5 Beacon Street, is the Boston Athenaeum. And in the middle of the 19th century, the Boston Athenaeum was one of the 5 largest libraries in the United States. It had the same number of books as the Library of Congress. Okay, it was a big deal, membership library. He said, I see these literary people going up and down the street. I see them all going to the Boston Athenaeum. And then I see them walking down to the bottom of the street to the Old Corner Bookstore. Because at this time, the Old Corner Bookstore was in the building, which is still there today, and was run by a duo called Tickner and Fields. And any given day, you might see walking in and out of there Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Louisa May Alcott, Harriet Beecher Stowe, a lot of people with 3 names. Should you not notice that today, the sign on it says Chipotle, but it is still the building, and the building has indeed been preserved. So we have all these literary people passing right by here, and he said, this is so logical with all these amazing people. This was the golden age of American literature, when true literature was being developed in Boston, this arc kind of Boston, Cambridge, Concord. It really was the center, and he said, I want to tap into that. Now, this was also up the street, where you're sitting, okay, the Gold Dome State House. The State House was up the street, and diagonally across from the Parker House was Old City Hall, the pretty one. Sorry. Anyway, from 1865 until 1969, that was City Hall. So not only do we have literary people walking up and down the street, we have all kinds of political people, and everybody wants to dine at this gorgeous new place with a great restaurant that's safe, that's beautiful. So, who came to dinner? People like that. Anyone know who that is? That is Twain when he was younger. Anyone know what color his hair is? Mark Twain, we think of him with white hair because we think of him much later. He had bright red hair, but you can't tell because we didn't have color photography. Anyway, Mark Twain, of course, came because he was visiting his literary friends in Boston and getting promoted here. This was Sarah Bernhardt, the famous French actress, who came and loved to stay at the Parker House, although we do have a record of one time her being turned away. She loved to travel with a menagerie of animals, and when she came in with Toto, the 6-foot python, I guess they decided that was a little too much, and she turned away in a huff when they said, you really can't bring your python in. But the other times, she did stay at the Parker House. Anyone know who this is? Ulysses S. Grant, yes, who came here frequently and also celebrated birthday parties at the Parker House. And then there are people like this. Babe Ruth, before he split for New York, okay, still wearing the Red Sox uniform, who used to apparently drink quite heavily at the Parker House. But many, many sports figures came there as well. So we have a wide appeal of people who are discovering this gorgeous new place that is supplanting the Tremont House and other hotels in the luxury, in the food, in everything they're doing. This guy came too. Anyone know who this handsome dude is? This is Ted Williams. He was apparently very gorgeous. He really liked to hang out in this place called the Revere Room. Today that space is called the Kennedy Room, and it's for events and special events, and you can rent the room. However, it was the Revere Room, which was one of the bars, and he fell in love with the cashier there, a woman named Doris Soule, and she became his first wife. So there were many reasons to come to the Parker House. If you were the Emperor of Japan, this is where you came to celebrate because everyone around the world knew the Parker House. If you were the Queen of Hawaii, this is where you came. Periodically, Hawaiian delegations still visit the Parker House, bring us gifts, and sing various anthems because they're so happy that the Queen had such a good time here in the 19th century. If you were one of the many Roosevelts who hung out in this greater area, like Theodore Roosevelt, you celebrated here. So again, celebrations from around the world. Now, especially in these early days, probably the most famous group of people to come to the Parker House came to be known as the Saturday Club. And if you come into the Parker House today, if you come in the Tremont Street entrance, on the left you'll see some very, very large images, framed images, and one of them is this thing on the right, which is a seating plan. What happened was, I mentioned all these literary people were going back and forth between the Athenaeum and the Old Corner Bookstore, and they soon decided, within a very short time after the Parker House opened, that this would be a great place for them to meet, to commune, to support each other, to sometimes share what they're working on, to drink, to eat. Did I mention drinking? They had a very, very good time. And there's, if you walk into the Parker House today, there's where the framed picture is. So among the people, this was a gentleman's club, by the way. In the 19th century, we don't have mixed clubs. We have men's clubs and we have women's clubs. But among the men in the Saturday Club was Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I have an ongoing discussion with my friend historian Charlie Bainey about whether or not Longfellow started writing Paul Revere's Ride at the Parker House. There was a legend that he was thinking about it at a Saturday Club meeting and flipped over his menu and started writing down the words. And my friend Charlie said, no, he was writing it at the Longfellow House. So it will go on forever, our discussion, because nobody ever took minutes at the Saturday Club meetings. People like James T. Fields. James Fields was basically the powerhouse at Ticknor and Fields at the Old Corner Bookstore. He was a member there, and he got to shepherd his various literary people and guide them at the Saturday Club and publish them and promote them and whatever else he needed to do. One famous story is that Ticknor and Fields had this author, this guy named Nathaniel Hawthorne, that they liked to work with. And at one point, Jamie Fields decided to go up to Salem, where Hawthorne was working at the time, and see if, in fact, he was working on something new that he might be able to help with or promote. And Hawthorne apparently said, I'm not working on anything, no. And then Jamie Fields said, okay, I'm going to take the train back to Boston. And as he was leaving, Hawthorne came out with a roll of paper and said, okay, I do have something. I don't know why you knew I was doing this, but here's something to read. And on the train back to Boston, Jamie Fields was reading that, The Scarlet Letter. And he was correct. By the way, I think that Hawthorne was maybe the most handsome of all the authors in all of history. He was very, very, I think his wife said he looked a lot like Lord Byron, and she appreciated that. Another thing that happened is that many of these guys that I'm mentioning, these famous people who like to go to the Parker House, the Saturday Club met the last Saturday of every month, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that a lot of these guys had day jobs because nobody really thought you could make a living as an author. And so they talked about that because, you know, it takes years to write a book, at least 2 years, sometimes 5, 7, 8 years. And so they started talking and saying, you know, maybe we should create something where you can make a living just on a monthly basis. And so while they were talking about this, they said, well, we could like serialize the books. We could do things like have you write shorter stories, and you could quit your day jobs. For example, Longfellow taught languages at Harvard. Hawthorne worked in the Customs House. And so everybody had other jobs. Oliver Wendell Holmes was a doctor. And what they did at the Parker House at the Saturday Club was they brainstormed, and in 1857 created the Atlantic Monthly there. This was the vehicle for making a living on a monthly basis, and started serializing their stories. So that was born there. Now, if you're the most famous novelist in the English-speaking world, and you want to come on a walking and talking tour of the United States, Boston is a logical place to come because of the Old Corner Bookstore, and a logical place to stay because of the Parker House. So in 1867, when Charles Dickens made only his second of ever tour of the United States, a reading tour, he decided he wanted to come to the Parker House. Now, the first time he came in 1842, he did stay at that fabulous Tremont House. And the Tremont House heard he was coming and wrote to him and said, please come and stay with us. And he went, nope, going to the Parker House. And he part of it was Jamie Fields, part of it was all these literary people who were staying there at the Parker House. And so he made the decision to stay there. Now, you know how very often places say George Washington slept here, and it meant he was there like for one night? Dickens actually had a room at the Parker House, had a suite at the Parker House for 5 months. So here he was here for a 5-month period, would do local readings, would go off and read in New York or in Maine or in Washington and take trips, but he kept his suite here the whole time. So it was a very big deal that he decided to stay there. And among the many books, he did arrive just before Thanksgiving in 1867. So given the time of year, what do you think was the book everyone wanted to hear read from? A Christmas Carol, of course. And A Christmas Carol had been written like 25 years earlier, but he had not been in the United States since it was written. So he did all kinds of wonderful, wonderful readings. And we still have, if you go to the mezzanine level, you'll see this large mirror at the end of the, right next to the press room. And this is the actual mirror that Dickens practiced in front of. Now, you go, what do you mean practice? Wasn't he reading his books? Dickens was actually a trained actor. And one of the reasons his talks were so popular was that he didn't stand there and just read out of a book. He actually acted out the parts. So if he was doing Scrooge, or if he was doing Tiny Tim, he would do the voices and the actions and the gestures, and that's what he practiced. And he had such a big fan base in Boston, well, everywhere he went in the U.S., that people tried to get in to see him practicing, and they actually had to have guards. He was kind of like a rock star of his time. They had to have guards there to prevent people from coming in and ogling and trying to figure out what was going on, or grabbing. He often wore this fur coat with the fur on the outside, grabbing a piece of the fur so they could have a little bit of Dickens. Also, when he gave his lectures, it was not uncommon for there to be long lines outside, that he would pack a hall with 2,000 people for one of his readings, and they scalped tickets to get in. People did pay to get into his readings. And there's the setup. Because he knew theater, he would travel with his whole setup. He had this little table, he had his little pitcher of water, a condensed version of the book that apparently he almost never looked at because he knew it by heart. He also traveled with a backdrop and lights. So he had the whole thing down. And when he first did this, he practiced it at the Parker House and supposedly read it, or portions of it, to the gang at the Saturday Club, who he met with. But then he just went around the corner to Tremont Temple and gave his first public reading. And they were just blown away. The reports in the papers were just, people laughed, people cried, they adored it. Now, fun story. 10 years ago now, I got a call from Patricia Gilrine, who at the time was one of the archivists at the Bostonian Society in the old State House. And she said, "Are you the house historian?" I said, "Uh-huh." She said, "We've got something of yours." And I went, "Okay." And so we went on a little field trip up to Haverhill to one of those generic buildings that doesn't look like anything but rents out floors so you can store stuff there. And we went up to some high up floor, and we walked into this room filled with dirty old wooden things, and she walked me over to this filthy door, and we saw the sign on it that said this was the door to Charles Dickens' suite at the Parker House. And the basic thing that happened was the Parker House under Harvey Parker kept growing, kept expanding up until 1925. And at that time, a lot of hotels that were Victorian, it was very, very Victorian, a lot of hotels were being torn down because people thought, Victorian, that's just overblown, it's just gaudy, it's really ugly. Stuff that we really love today, that people were thinking, we need simplicity. So what they did was they tore down 2/3 of the Parker House and replaced it And 1/3 of it was left up, the Bosworth building, because it was more modern and was fireproofed and all that, which has allowed the Parker House to be the longest continuously operating hotel in the U.S. because while they were doing the construction, they kept the hotel open, okay? Just like while we were doing our most recent renovation, we kept the hotel open. But anyway, what happened was one of the guys in the demolition crew saw this with a sign on it, and he went, I'm supposed to throw this out. I don't want to do that. Is there some historical society around here? So he picked it up, walked down the street over to the old State House, and gave them this door. And they put it in storage for 90 years and never looked at it again until they called me. And so it was very exciting. We did a bunch of paperwork, and they gave our door back. And it's now on display in the lower level lobby at the Parker House. One of my favorite stories is that this is the lower level, so you might call it the basement, but we don't. Anyway, I was giving a tour, and this guy kept going, wow, that's really weird. And I went, what's weird? He said, why would Charles Dickens have stayed in the basement? So it's like, no, this is just the display, just the display. Anyway, just 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, his great-great-grandson came to spend time with us. He's come to visit us before, and we were able to do some videos of him that we're going to be using for our celebrations of the 170th anniversary. And he's wonderful. He's a trained actor. He, I guess, makes a good deal of his living from doing his father's readings from his great-great-grandfather's books, and he's a delightful human being. During the Civil War, the Parker House, having opened in 1855, Civil War starts in 1861, so many events happened there. Many generals met there, many people stayed there. A lot of abolitionists had meetings there. Much of the Saturday Club, many of those members were in fact abolitionists. Lincoln was actually invited to come to the Parker House, but he didn't. He didn't come, but he wasn't able to, but we do have letters to and from him explaining why he can't come to some festivities celebrating Jefferson's birthday. Jefferson was not alive, they just kept celebrating his birthday. However, his wife did come in 1862. She engaged in one of her favorite pastimes, which was shopping, which she loved to do, and we do actually have her carte de visite from staying here. And she was heralded, and little brass bands came under her window, and she waved to them, and everybody was excited that she was indeed there. Now, speaking of the Civil War, there was this family of actors. There were three of the gentlemen in the family were actors. Their last name was Booth. Edwin Booth actually made his name in Boston and was one of the most popular and most talented Shakespearean actors in the United States. And he really began in Boston. And his younger brother, who you probably know as John Wilkes Booth, was also an actor of a different caliber. He was more, well, let's just say if Edwin were on Masterpiece Theater, John Wilkes would be on the soaps. Okay, so he liked swashbuckling, he liked sword play, he was apparently very handsome. And we do know, in fact, that in the early on April 5th and 6th, 1865, he was in town staying at the Parker House. He was actually dining with a lady in the ladies' lounge, and everyone noticed he was there because he was handsome and he was famous as an actor. What was odd, and what was reported in the local papers, was that he was practicing shooting in a nearby shooting gallery. Now, basically, in the 19th century, if you were traveling from town to town, whether it were near or far, you might get attacked by someone on the way. And therefore, a lot of gentlemen liked to keep pistols with them to protect themselves, just in case they were attacked while they were traveling. And many hotels, either in their basements or nearby, had shooting galleries where you could practice your aim, okay? The Parker House didn't have one, but right in Chapman Place, next door, there was a shooting gallery called Floyd and Edwards. And a lot of people noticed, and it made it into the newspapers, that John Wilkes was practicing shooting, but doing weird stuff, like gymnastics and firing over his shoulder and under his legs and doing wild things. 8 days later, he went to Washington and assassinated President Lincoln. And Harvey Parker was kind of mortified by this. that this happened at the Parker House. So, now, on a happier note, one of the politicians most closely associated with the Parker House is John F. Kennedy. The Kennedys, he was born in Brookline. The Kennedys always worked, lived in this area, very often even on the edge of Beacon Hill. And this is little John. I think this is close to his, I think he's actually 7 here. I was looking for a picture of him at 6. There's a wonderful story about how he was, there was a party in the press room at the Parker House in 1923, and his maternal grandfather, who we know as Honey Fitz, John Fitzgerald, former Boston mayor, was having a party. And little JFK was standing outside, and a gentleman came up to him and said, "What are you doing here, kid?" And he said, "Oh, my grandpa, they're celebrating him inside, and he's the greatest grandpa a child could have." And the guy said, "If I brought you inside, would you say that?" And he said, "Yeah." And so he picks up this little 6-year-old, takes him into the press room, stands him on the table, and little John says, "I have the greatest grandfather in the world." That was JFK's first public speech at the Parker House. Anyway, he did make lots and lots of other public speeches. Here he is after coming back from World War II, being the hero of PT 109, meeting with Honey Fitz there. The family did all kinds of political things, personal things. The Parker House was a very, very favorite place for the extended Kennedy family to be. In 1946, he did announce his candidacy for Congress at the Parker House in the press room, and the family just did all kinds of activities. We have countless pictures I've gotten from the JFK library of him at various meetings, celebrations, and so on. And there he is with his mom and dad flanking him on either side, Rose and Joe. He also did personal things. In Parker's restaurant, inside the Parker House, there is a table number 40. This is the table at which John proposed to Jacqueline Bouvier. And yes, I know there's a place in Georgetown that claims the same thing. And it's a long story. We can talk about it later. However, we have a little plaque there that announces that. And people who want to propose marriage or just have a special occasion often ask for table number 40 there. And there they are at the wedding. And this, by the way, he had his bachelor's party also in the press room at the Parker House. And this was a cover of Life magazine. They had an artist copy this and make a painting of this, and his buddies gave him that painting at the bachelor party. So I actually found this at a flea market. I was very excited to find this copy of Life magazine. Again, the family continued to do things. They were great pals with the Dunphy family, who ran the Parker House for almost 3 decades. And we have some nice letters in the history gallery in the lower level lobby that thank us, or thank the Parker House for all the years and all the events that the Kennedys have been able to hang out there. And there's the Kennedy room, which I mentioned before at one point was the Revere room. Another person who closely is associated was James Michael Curley. You've all heard of Curley, I assume. Held many, many political positions, but is probably best known for being 4-time mayor and 2-time prison inmate. His story was loosely told in this 1956 book by Edwin O'Connor called The Last Hurrah. What a lot of people don't know is when Edwin wrote this, everyone knew that the lead character, Frank Skeffington, was in fact Curley, but they tried to, he tried to pretend it wasn't. But what people don't know is that the term "the last hurrah" for the last time you do something important, in your life, Serena Williams' last professional game or whatever, the term came from this book. It is not in the lexicon of the English language until this book came out in 1956. So it's a very recent term. Yes, I'm sorry? Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, yes, indeed. So here he is. By the way, when the book first came out, he was no longer in the public eye. He basically dominated Boston politics in one way or another from about 1900 to 1950. And when this came out in 56, people had kind of forgotten about him. And so when this came out, he was very upset at first, and then he realized people were recognizing him on the street and saying, "Oh, I love that book about you." And so he actually decided to write his own book in response to that, called "I Do It Again." So, and there he is, and you can see the marquee of the Parker House behind him, because of course, when he served as mayor, he was in Old City Hall. And he was known for tipping silver dollars. Someone gave this to us because he tipped this. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're doing that in the 1920s or 30s, that's a big deal. So we have one of those. Only 2 years later, they made the film version. And who is that playing him? Spencer Tracy, otherwise known as Katharine Hepburn's boyfriend. And to this day, well, since 1971, we have had at the Parker House a bar called the Last Hurrah. At one point, it was originally in the basement. For those of you who have been around for a while, the Winokur Band for 11 years, I guess, a little more than that, was the house band down there. Then in 1999, it moved upstairs, and the Last Hurrah is still there today. And a lot of people hang out there, like these local boys, Matt and Ben. And one of the reasons that Matt and Ben hang out there, you know, I mean Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. I don't have to tell you guys. Or this guy, who was Kevin Bacon, who was the star of the show. They actually filmed the pilot of City on a Hill, their TV series, some of it at the Parker House. And there's some images of them in the Last Hurrah that they tried to make look like the 1990s. But there they are. Now, one of the families that you may still remember, Harvey Parker died in 1884, and other corporations or families or corporations and institutions ran it at different times. His family didn't continue to run it after he died, even though they had created an organization for that. But starting in 1968, the Dunphys took over and became kind of legendary. There were 7 brothers. It was a huge family. And one of the things they did was create this group called the New England Circle, where they would get together for conversation, people from all different walks of life, international or national figures, and then local people that might be the head of the local homeless shelter or local civil rights organizations, and have people share ideas, share food, share the table. So it was kind of maybe in a way the Saturday Club on steroids in a modern era. Anyone remember the woman on the right? Jerry Ferraro. Yeah, so among the people who came there. Here's a whole group. Can anyone name all of them? We got Dukakis, we got Flynn, we got Jerry, we got John Kerry, we have Mrs. Dukakis, and we have Teddy Kennedy. So these are the kind of people that would be showing up at the Parker House, at New England Circle events, and other political events, because again, this was the place to be. One particular thing was the Dunphy family was close friends with the Kings, and had been very good to Coretta Scott King after Martin Luther King's assassination in 1968, when she needed a place after the assassination. Can you imagine having kids, the media's coming after you, you're mourning the death of your husband, and the Dunphys had a place up on Lake Winnipesaukee that had private landings, and they said, "Why don't you come up and spend the summer with us? And no one will even know you're there." And no one did. It never leaked out. And they really got a very serious reprieve. So the families were very bonded. And so it made sense that in 1977, Coretta did indeed come to town and dedicate the King Room, which is there to this day. Among the various people over the years, we could go on forever. Muhammad Ali, Leonard Nimoy, Denise Graves, the mezzo-soprano, Judy Garland. The lower left, we have Coretta again. Don't know if you see that little inset of the man and woman. That's Doris Kearns and her husband, Richard Goodwin. Down below, another couple. Anyone recognize them? Tip O'Neill's in the lower right, Gloria Steinem above that, but that's Hugh Hefner with Barbie Benton. So all of these, just a wide array of people finding an appeal with the Parker House. more recently, governors. If it looks like Tommy, well, it is Tommy O'Neill, who looks like his dad, Tip. That's Patti Smith, the rock star, Jacques Pepin, and Lydia Shire, Obama, Kevin Bacon, the great-great-grandson of Dickens. So a huge array of people. One of my favorite events was 3 years ago when Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter, Yolanda, came and spoke to Boston school kids, high school kids, about how high schoolers can be activists and what young kids, teenagers can do to help change the world. So it was really amazing to have her there. Now, over the years, the Parker House changed. That's what it first looked like, okay? What happened was Harvey would be successful, make a bunch of money, and then he'd look around and go, that building next to me, I'm going to buy that. He would buy it, tear it down, build, and expand the Parker House. So he did that. That was actually to the left was one of the original Mass Hort buildings. So he bought that from them and then created that and expanded to the side, expanded up. And then after his death, he'd actually bought the land all the way up to Tremont Street, but his successors continued to build until this is what the Parker House looked like by the late 1880s and 90s up until the early 1900s. It was referred to as the French Chateau. I really love this. It's not there now, but we'll explain that. As I mentioned before, we have people going, these are old buildings, they're decrepit, we don't want them anymore. This is standing inside the Parker House as it was torn down between 1925 and 27, and this rebuilt in its place. And that is essentially the same building that's here today. What I love about it is that even though it went along with the modern times on the outside, you always feel like you're in the 19th century, in a really slick, nice 19th century on the inside. So maintaining the past and the present simultaneously, which is pretty exciting. Now, one of the things that happened as I worked as a house historian was I was given this task of finding out more because apparently Harvey had one of the greatest chefs in the world working at the Parker House. And I was told his name was Sanzian, S-A-N-Z-I-A-N. We researched this for years and found nothing. And I thought, wait a sec, this is weird. How come if this is one of the most famous chefs in the world, we can't even find out his first name, okay? The Armenian community was very excited, and you'll find many references still to this day about our Armenian French chef named Sanzian. Accidentally, one day I was sitting in the library at the Globe and found an article about the hottest places in Boston in the summer. And they said, we go downstairs into the cooking area of the Parker House and we find Chef Anezan. And I went, oh my goodness, we had the wrong name. So for 75 years, it's been written that Sanzian was our French chef, whereas his name was really Anezan. And once you had this name, we found all kinds of great things about him and how extraordinary he was. We even found a picture of him. And under him, he was French. He came from Marseille. He was heralded around the world and considered extraordinary. Under him, a baker named Ward, we still have no further info on this, invented the iconic Parker House roll, which, by the way, if you look at that, the roll today doesn't look the same as it did 30 years ago or 80 years ago. It used to look more like a pocketbook and fold up on the top. It's still the same ingredients, which every other ingredient is butter. And it's still extraordinary and delicious. But these became, by the 1870s, we have people all around the world ordering these, them being mailed out, getting major press around the world. Advertisers want to use Parker House rolls all the time. There was even a feature in National Geographic about Parker House rolls. It was a big deal, okay? Today, a light, fluffy, moist, buttery roll may not seem like that big a deal. I continue to love them, but at that time, it was a huge deal compared to the breads that preceded it, which were more like hardtack. We still have, this is at least 100 years old, the Duchess divider, that once you've kneaded the dough, you put it in here to divide it into small sections. And that's what comes out, that circular thing, and then it's laid out on a pan, and you get the rolls. Now, there was a gentleman named Jacques Offenbach. He was a German-born. He was best known for living in France. He was just the master of the operetta. Now, if operas are here, operettas are here, okay? So it was nice, it was a living, but it wasn't as elevated as an opera. And a lot of people from foreign countries, from Europe, realized if they were short of money, they could make a lot of money touring in the US and giving lectures and talks. And he was one of them. He was actually quite short of money. He came here, he stayed at the Parker House. As the legend is told, he was sitting in Parker's restaurant and served a Parker House roll, took a bite out of it, and was in ecstasy, and started singing something like Parker House Roll's How I Love You, okay? The tune that he created in singing about Parker House rolls became Les Contes d'Hoffmann, the Tales of Hoffmann, the one and only opera that Jacques Offenbach ever wrote, inspired by a Parker House roll. Okay, for years, it's been said that there was a secret recipe, okay? I did create that in AI, the only time I've ever done that. Okay? It's kind of like, you hear that Coca-Cola has a secret recipe, okay, and it's locked somewhere, and you can retro-engineer it, but you can't really have the recipe. So supposedly there was a secret recipe, even though people wrote the recipe. This is in, this is the Boston Cooking School Cookbook in 1896, written by this woman named Fanny Farmer, and she had Parker House rolls recipes, but her office was just around the corner, and she came to the Parker House on a regular basis, as did many women. Women loved coming there to the ladies' lounge. And anyway, so she apparently retro-engineered. So it was out there, but it was technically a secret until Eleanor came along. So Franklin D. Roosevelt came to Boston. He needed Massachusetts. He needed to win Massachusetts. Who did he go to? James Michael Curley. Get me Massachusetts. Okay, so the two of them met and plotted. In the meanwhile, Eleanor was checking out the food. And Eleanor traveled with him everywhere. She had the first housekeeper who had worked with her in Hyde Park and then at the Parker House. Not at the Parker House, I'm sorry, at the White House, one of those houses. And they fell in love with Parker House rolls, and they requested that the recipe be sent to them. How do you turn down the First Lady? So again, as legend goes, I've been in touch with the Roosevelt's library. We've looked through letters. We cannot find any letter requesting this, so I have to keep saying it's a legend. She might have just done it in person, or the letters are lost. But anyway, they did get the recipe. The cat was out of the bag, and Henrietta Nesbitt even printed it in her White House cookbook, so the presidential cookbook. So you can all make Parker House rolls today. Now, Boston cream pie is everywhere, okay? This was a sampler of a few of the things, the Dunkin' Donuts Boston cream pie. It's all over the place in all different incarnations. However, the original did in fact begin at the Parker House. If you want to make one, you just get a sponge cake, slice it in half or make 2 discs, add pastry cream, close it, drench it in chocolate, okay? And then we also add all kinds of accoutrements and fancy things that make it really lovely. But there we have a Boston cream pie. It's a cake. It's not a pie, okay? As far as we can figure out, you know the expression American as apple pie? In all the early American kitchens, everybody had a pie pan. Pies were much easier to make than cakes. Cakes really came a lot later because you needed more sophisticated flours, you needed baking powder, you needed a lot of things that they didn't have originally. So everybody had a pie pan. So when cakes started being made, they made them in the pans they had. And sometimes in the 19th century, you'll even see people referring to cakes and pies interchangeably. So Boston cream pie was never a pie, it's always a cake. It was, in fact, you know how we have the state flag, the state song, the state bird, the state, I know you don't know any of them, but we have them, okay? There was a competition for the official state dessert, and Boston cream pie won in 1996. And it beat out, who can tell me? Beat out Fig Newtons, next. Not chocolate chip, Toll House cookies, right? Okay, we can go up to. And the last one is harder, Indian pudding. It had to have been invented in Massachusetts. And here is Governor Weld with the Norton High School civics class that pushed specifically for Boston cream pie to become the official state dessert. So it in fact is. Now, as long as we're in the bake shop, we do have this, that's actually an older picture, but it's still broken. We do have this piece of marble slab there. And you know, we're the Parker House. We could afford to replace this, right? We could get a new marble slab that isn't broken on the edge. However, we keep this because this guy worked on it somewhere around 1912. And at the time, he was called Van Ba or Ba. Why does that matter? You may know him as Ho Chi Minh, okay? Who, as far as we can see, had three great loves, or three great missions. Number one, freeing Southeast Asia from French imperialist control. Number two, spreading world communism. And number three, baking. And he was an expert baker and did work there. And because of that, on a regular basis, this is our general manager, John Murtha, in the middle, on a regular basis, Vietnamese delegations, including sometimes the premier, come and visit the Parker House, bring gifts, visit the bake shop, and want to pay homage to the place where Ho Chi Minh once worked. This, by the way, is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy that we think might, in fact, be Ho Chi Minh holding a Boston cream pie, but we're not sure. Other culinary rock stars. In the 1940s, if you were to look in Parker's restaurant, much of the waitstaff was African American. And so it wasn't unusual when this guy, Malcolm Little, came in to work as a busboy. You may not know Malcolm Little, but you certainly know Malcolm X. Okay, so another famous individual. And then, of course, this guy worked here as a sous chef from 1979 to 81. And a lot of well-known chefs, maybe not that well-known, did work at the Parker House first. Here he's a cute little guy in 79. And he does come, if you go to his website, he has little videos when he comes to visit the Parker House and visit. Now, when Harvey Parker died, he was 79 years old. It was 1884. Now, Harvey had two sons, and he fully intended to keep his family in charge of the Parker House forever. Unfortunately, his youngest son died just short of 7 years old. But he had an older son who was 24 years old named Hayward, and he went, Hayward, I want you to take over, but I want you to see the world first. I want you to explore before you come back and commit yourself, as I have, to running this hotel. So he planned a trip for Hayward on a ship that was going to go to China first and go around the world. What happened was the ship left and it never came back. It sank and Hayward died. So Harvey had no heirs. And he did buy a plot at Mount Auburn Cemetery. He took care of his entire extended family. In fact, his father had predeceased him, and he brought people from other graves at Mount Auburn and other places, brought them all, so the whole family was there together. Curiously, they have a lot at Mount Auburn, but the center is not Harvey, the center is Hayward. Okay, so the biggest single monument there is to his 24-year-old son. And Harvey himself is just on the side. It just says H.T. Parker, and you would never know how important a person he was or that his legacy lives on to this day. Speaking of his legacy, anyone know what that building is? This was the original Museum of Fine Arts. The Museum of Fine Arts was originally, when it opened in 1876, was in Copley Square. And the short story is they borrowed a lot of collections. They got a bunch from the Athenaeum, they got from private benefactors, but they also got their entire print department from Harvard, who had a lot of prints, and they gave them to the new MFA. Then Harvard said, oh, we're going to open our own museums. We want it all back. So we had to return, or the MFA had to return all that and had no print department. When Harvey died, he left $100,000 to the Museum of Fine Arts, which was able to purchase the replacement section, the print department at the MFA. So he created the foundation of the modern print department. And today, his bust is still there at the print department at the MFA, having created this. Now, there's one more brief story I want to tell. After Harvey died, a son-in-law and a steward took over the Parker House for a few years, but the person who became his most significant successor was a guy named J. Reed Whipple. And he took over in 1891. One of the most amazing things he did was he was from New Hampshire, and he had this gigantic farm, huge farm up there that was known as the Valley View Farm, and he built a spur onto the railroad, the existing B&M Railroad, so that every single day he could bring fresh produce down to the Parker House, and this would be eggs and meats and just a little bit of everything, milk, and it was a big deal, okay? So I wasn't surprised when I came to the Parker House. Then when I went to the mezzanine, now here again you'll see Dickens' mirror at the end, okay? So we have the press room on the right, the elevators on the left, and there's the Dickens mirror. There's this giant portrait of this guy. And I went, wow, this guy must be important. And I went over and I looked, and it was J. Reed Whipple. And I went, wow, that's weird, because we've got a picture of Harvey Parker, but it's not that big. So this guy must be very, very important. So this, this little sign sat there for years that this was J. Reed Whipple, and I went, okay, that's interesting. Until I took a field trip here to the State House. And I was here to see a play by a group called Plays and Place, and I was introduced to Sam Doran at the State House News Department. And he said, you're from the Parker House? And I said, yeah. He said, come here, I want to talk to you. And we walked, he said, I want to show you something. I've been waiting to talk to someone from the Parker House. We walked down the hallway, and it's actually probably the hall you walked in. It's just next to Karen Spilka's office. And he showed me this portrait. And he said, do you know who that is? And I said, yeah, it's J. Reed Whipple. It's the same picture we have hanging at the Parker House. What's J. Reed Whipple doing here? And he said, look at the sign. It's not J. Reed Whipple. It's the governor of Massachusetts, okay, Governor Greenhalgh. And after some research, much of which was done by Sam, a little by me, we discovered that the portrait we've thought for years was J. Reed Whipple was not, but was a former governor of Massachusetts. And this is not in the book, by the way. This happened after the book went to print. But it's one of my favorite stories, and Sam proceeded to do a wonderful story in the State House newspaper about this. And so we don't even have a picture of J. Reed Whipple hanging. We have a governor that I'm betting you never heard of. But that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, so thank you for being here. Thank you. I'm, again, so excited that you're here on the actual day that we opened 170 years ago. Please stop by for Rebirth of a Legend. And I guess that's the end right now. We're celebrating 170 years. Are there any questions? Yes? I'm sorry, the what? The lower level, executive offices. So if you go in the School Street entrance and go down, executive offices, historical gallery, and then in places that you're not allowed to go, there's all cooking and bake shop and kitchens and all that, and there are even sub-levels below that too. No. All of that went after. The barbershop was still there when the last hurrah was downstairs, but that I can't remember the year. But yes, all that's gone. Yeah, yep. Oh, there's also a fitness center.
On the way up to the mezzanine, is there still a bar there?
Yes, Parker's Bar is on the way up to the mezzanine. Yes. And so the two bars, Parker's Bar, Last Hurrah, and then Parker's Restaurant. Right now, it is only open for breakfast and lunch. And so if you want dinner, you can actually get that in the Last Hurrah. Did I tell the truth? I did? Okay, good. Some colleagues are here with me. Yes?
The mirror, the
Closer.
Dickens mirror?
Closer.
The Dickens mirror?
Yes.
Underneath is an inscription telling that, among other things, it says he died in God's Hill.
I told so many people, it's Gat's Hill. Is it still God's Hill now under the inscription? Do you?
You know, I don't know the answer to that.
I have to go up and take
The question
look.
is, it says where Dickens died?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it wasn't at the Parker House.
No,
no.
It says, it's inscribed there.
Oh.
He died at God's Hill.
Oh, well,
It's-
if it's just one of those British words we can't pronounce. It's like saying, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I have to.
Curiously, though, speaking of dying, after Dickens left, the most famous actress in Boston, a woman named Charlotte Cushman, actually lived in the Dickens suite. And she died there. Not anything nefarious, it's just that she died and while she was living there. And so, to this day, periodically, the number 1 elevator is called to the 3rd floor at the Parker House, and no one's there. And Dickens and Cushman did stay. Their suite was on the 3rd floor. And legends have grown that, in fact, either Dickens or Cushman is inviting people up to visit. It's only happened to me once, but it has happened many times. And Otis Elevator says that the elevator works just fine. We don't know why it likes to go to the 3rd floor every once in a while. Any other questions?
Is the ballroom still on the top floor?
Yes, the ballroom is still on the very top. And all of this, again, you have to come and look. It's gorgeous. In many of the rooms, the new rugs, because of Dickens' significance, have portions of A Christmas Carol embedded in the rug, so you can stand there reading the rug. It's just gorgeous, just gorgeous. There was a question? Yes.
Are there any records of employees of the Parker House over the years, personnel files, any information that you might have on ordinary people that worked in the hotel?
Yeah, unfortunately, because of fires and things like, the incident where they tore down the old building and just by chance somebody found the Dickens door, so much of that stuff was thrown out. So there is very, very little. A lot of the research I've done over the years has been finding artifacts and information from the Parker House from other places. For example, the greatest supply of old menus I found at the Bostonian Society, and therefore went in with my camera and photographed, a couple of hundred menus from the old days. So we have very, very little, and it's sad. Yeah.
Would you welcome information about people who worked at the Parker House?
Please come and get my card. Yes, I totally would welcome that information. Totally. Images, stories, letters, anything, anecdotes. I would love that. Thank you. We keep them in our archives, which we call the Parkives. Any other questions? Reese, do you want me to mention what's going on now? Sure. This new book that just came out, on the 170th anniversary, Heaven by Hotel Standards, Reese from the Parker House, who is standing right here, has some gifts for you. If you just come up to here, she will give you a gift. Oh, do you want to? We are hoping that we have enough to give you a book. Retail value, $30. You are so lucky to be here on the 170th anniversary. This doesn't happen every day. Okay, any other questions? Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.